You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, I'll tell you, we've had a lot of things in the news lately that have been pretty timely that have made me kind of think about it. In the last week, we've had a couple of situations that were fairly similar, and that's trucks catching on fire.
Yes, we have had a rash of vehicle fires. One of them happened to pull in right here under the big blue WPKY sign.
Right.
I think were driving down the highway and had a pickup load of groceries, so they had a lot of combustibles and things like that in the bed of the pickup, and threw a cigarette out, which wound up whipping back into the groceries and burnt. It was a pretty good fire right here by WPKY. So while we're talking about discarded cigarettes, they are responsible for a lot of fires
Right.
everywhere, always have been, and now what we can maybe do something about is the future. But people are in such a habit of just throwing a cigarette out the window. And in the spring and the fall, when we have our grass fire seasons, when the risk of wildfires goes up because of dead vegetation or dried out vegetation, people really need to be aware of how dangerous it is to throw a cigarette out. And we go to a number of fires every year in the median on the interstate, in the ditches along the highways, and sometimes it involves rolls of hay, that farmers have put up.
That's right.
They've worked hard and they've got to have that hay to get through the winter.
He's doing my segues for me this morning.
And it's such a shame to see all that destroyed over somebody just casually tossing a cigarette out.
Well, it is. And, with the grass drying out, and you were talking about even with somebody mowing their yard, think about the grass clippings. That is kindling at its best, just laying there on the side of the road.
Year round, you have hay fields.
Right.
You have bean fields that have been planted, beans that have followed wheat. So you've got all the straw and wheat stubble that's left in bean fields. And we've seen that several times over the year where come through and bush hog, well, then you've got the dead grass in the ditch.
Right.
And then you got a wheat field that's been double cropped and is got beans growing in it now. And a cigarette catches the bush hogged dead grass on fire in the ditch, spreads up the bank, over into the straw, and now we're burning up, a crop of soybeans.
Well, and I know a lot of people, too, will say, well, it's just a field, it's replaceable. But, I live out there right in smack dab in the middle of a hay field and a bean field, and well, actually wheat right now, I guess. But it's, there's houses that join along those fields, and there's little kids, and there's people and animals that live along those fields. Not to mention, those farmers work awfully hard. That's their livelihood setting in that field.
That's right. And, every little bit that you take out is coming straight out of their bottom line, their profit.
Right.
So if you burn an acre or two of beans up, it may not be that big a deal to the person that threw the cigarette out, but it's a big deal to the person that owns the soybeans, and then you run the risk of it getting out and getting away from roads and getting where it's not accessible to us, and causing a large problem.
Well, and here's something that, and it's something that happened to me before, and I know it's happened to me in the past as well, not just recently, but going down the road and you look to your left or you look to your right and there's something on fire. And this has happened before to me. It's, what do you do?
Yeah, what's legal to burn is natural vegetation. Leaves, limbs, wood. That's the only thing that's legal to burn.
Okay.
And every year we go to a number of fires where people are trying to burn trash and it blows out, or they get an aerosol can in the trash barrel and it explodes and blows fire out. And then the next thing you know, their outbuildings, their garage, maybe even their house, their crops, their fields, their woods are on fire. So we need to get rid of that burn barrel unless we're burning leaves or limbs in it.
Well, and there are burn bans too, right?
There's time restrictions that are every year. We have a spring season and a fall season when the Department of Forestry puts a restriction on open burning. where you can burn from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. Outside of the spring season and the fall season, then it's legal to burn leaves, limbs, or a brush pile pretty much any time through the day. But that still means you have to use common sense and look at what's around it and how far, the distance is 150 feet, and there have been people that were further than 150 feet from the woods that were burning during the legal hours, and their fires still got out.
It takes no time.
It takes no time to do that, and what people have to understand is you are responsible for any damage that is done if you're burning anything, whether you're burning it legally or whether you're actually burning it outside of the regulations. You're still responsible for everything that is damaged by that fire. And I don't think people understand that sometimes. We're too quick to light a fire, not realizing that we're totally responsible for it, and we're totally responsible for all the damage that it does.
Well, sometimes it feels like the easy way to get rid of something instead of loading it in the back of the truck or trash bags and carting it off and all of that good stuff. And I think everybody at one time or another, if you're a homeowner, and especially when you live out in the county, you've got brush in the yard, you've got trees that are down, or you got limbs or old stuff you want to get rid of, you burn something in the yard. I mean, it's not uncommon or unusual at all. Now, is there something that we can do? Can we call you to let you know that that's what we're doing?
Well, on the larger fires like brush piles and things, we recommend that people call our 911 center, Pennyrile Emergency Assistance Center. We refer to as Central Dispatch. Their phone number, their non-emergency phone number is 270-365-7860. And let them know that you have a brush pile that you're going to burn and where you're at. Because with everybody having cell phones now, people driving down the road, if they see smoke, if they see flames, they don't necessarily check it out or find out what it is. They just call and say, hey, I see something on fire out here. And then a lot of times we wind up getting sent out there, and that costs taxpayers money. It's endangering the firefighters having to respond out there. It's endangering that fire apparatus that's responding out there. And so it's better off if we know that people are burning in an area, and that way if somebody just calls in and says, I see smoke at this location, but I don't know what it is, then a lot of times we can either check on it, or if we know somebody's burning in that area, the fire department doesn't get sent out and cause a lot of liability and endangering everybody with the fire department having to respond to a false alarm.
Well, and I'll tell you, that's happened to me before. I mean, where the field beside me, they were burning brush and it got out. And that scares you half to death. I've had a hay bale catch on fire before. I'm not going to act like we didn't. I mean, we've had the aerosol can that said, whoop, how'd that one get in there? And it shoots out. It happens. But the biggest thing is, you do everything you can to prevent it.
That's right.
But then when things do happen, what do we do till you get there? With everybody putting up hay right now, hay season is about to and is already starting to get into full swing. So if one of these light up, what do we do till you get there?
Well, placing that call early helps. A lot of times people will try to fight the fire till it gets completely out of hand, and it's spread out to where it's going to be hard to reach and hard to deal with. So delayed calls to 911 cause a lot of extra damage in everything, not just in the field fires, but industrial settings, everything like that. So don't delay calling for help. We'd rather come out and maybe you've caught it and got it and have it under control when we get there than to wait till it gets so big now everybody's going to have a hard time catching it. And then another thing for the farmers and folks that are putting up hay, just are going to be burning legally. Think about how that's going to look to the public. People can see maybe your field from a couple of different highways sometimes, different angles. And so think about how that's going to look to the traveling public, to people that are passing by. If you make yourself visible, if people know that somebody's watching it and around it, and you have to keep up with it. You have to watch it and make sure that it doesn't spread. Then they're less likely to call for 911 when they see something and don't know what it is. And another thing for the farmers, we've seen just dozens and dozens or maybe even hundreds of rolls of hay all together. And it's always a good idea, I think, to break your hay up a little bit and put it in smaller bunches to where if you do have a roll of hay or a bale of hay that catches on fire from the heating process that the hay goes through, it's always amazed me that hay could set itself on fire spontaneously.
Well, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah,
farmers have to be so careful to make sure that it's good and dry when they put it up. And
even if they do everything right, sometimes I've heard lots of folks talk about getting to the center of a roll of hay and it's charred, where it got that hot in the center while it was curing.
Happens more time than what they think, probably.
Yeah, a lot of them have signs where they just almost caught on fire.
Right.
And but don't put 1,000 rolls of hay together. Try to put breaks between. So if you do have a roll catch fire, it doesn't burn all your hay.
Right.
Because hay is one of the hardest things to get out because it burns. A lot of times it has started in the center.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'll tell you, when you get a roll of hay, and when we were the ding-dongs that caught it on fire, and I would say we, but it wasn't necessarily me, Mr. Cowan.
Yeah.
But no, if it catches on fire, it goes to the even when you just about the time you think you got it out, you open up another layer, and there's another ember, and there's another, section that's already on fire.
That's correct. About the only thing we can do, we can knock the fires down, but as far as getting a roll of hay out, most of the time it's embedded in the hay.
Right.
And you just have to take a front end loader and push it out into a field where it's not going to catch anything else on fire. And if you want it to try to burn up fast, you can try to unroll it or spread it out some, but hay is almost impossible to put out because the fire is so deep seated in it usually, and the water just can't soak in.
It cannot.
To the hay.
It sure does seem like it soaks in when you're trying to dry it so that you can bale it. It seems like it never wants to dry out. But boy, you catch that stuff on fire, it does not want to get wet.
You just can't hardly put it out. And another piece of advice for the folks that have cattle or raise hay is try not to store it right next to the highway. Think about the ditch catching on fire. Is your hay just right there on the edge of the right-of-way where the fire can spread to it?
I didn't ever think about that, to be honest. That's something I've never really thought about.
And then unfortunately, there's a little bit of meanness out there from time to time when people will just set the hay on fire on purpose. So anytime you store your hay right next to public access, it's in more danger of being set on fire, either accidentally or on purpose.
And I know some people, now in our area, a lot of people probably understand that, but we're not talking about rolls that you can pick up and just scatter it out with a rake. And we're talking about 1,600-pound bales. These are
that's correct.
Huge. I guess I should call them rolls, but they are enormous. And some of them, are really tight. If they are really good at what they're doing, they're going to be good and tight and jam-packed. And those things, boy, if they ever go up, they are horrible to try to do anything
Well,
with.
we've had incidences where rolls of hay were set on the front porch of an old abandoned house or an old abandoned store.
Right.
And it was a place where somebody could pull off in the country to use the bathroom or whatever. And so guess what? Somebody set them on fire. Well, that burnt the abandoned structure up too. And then hay bales roll.
Yes,
and,
they do.
We've had farmers trying to separate it and grab one in a hurry or push it out and get it on unlevel ground, and then next thing you know, that roll of burning hay is rolling down the hill.
It's a mobile burning roll of hay.
Mobile burning roll of hay now.
Well, and when you think about that, when you say that, the equipment that we store, when we do hay, I was talking to you about it a while ago, that when we do hay, our equipment gets hot.
Yes.
That, I mean, it's if you have to change a blade or you have to change something on it that breaks, and it always does every year.
Yeah.
It's hot.
Yes,
I mean, it's hot enough to the touch that you can't touch it with
bearings go out. You
Right.
know, bush hogs, the bearings in bush hogs, balers. You've got mechanical parts that wear out that get
Right.
hot. You've got friction. You know, a lot of friction
Right.
going on that's building heat, and a lot of bush hogs have set fields on fire.
Well, and
before.
lawnmowers too.
And-
I mean,
and
it doesn't have to
lawnmowers.
be just a huge bush hog. It could be just a lawnmower, right?
Yep, we've had people trying to mulch leaves and getting too many leaves and choking their mowers down,
Right.
and we've had them burn the yard and the mower up. And then, you know, every now and then you just have we've had several mowers over the years. People have mowed, put them up, and go in the house and look outside, and their mower's on fire. And so it was either on fire, they didn't realize it, or something did ignite. And then you've got batteries. Anytime you got batteries, you've got the potential for a short. You know that
And with the gasoline.
yes, and you got gasoline, you've got oil, you've got grease, you've got electrical ignition sources
Right.
going on, and you've got hot motors, hot mufflers. So we just take it for granted, and
I'm making a mental note of all the dumb things I've done in the last month or
yeah.
so.
Well, there's a few garages and a few buildings that would be around if somebody let their mower left it outside, let it cool down a little bit before they actually
My
put it
grandma
inside
would
a
say,
building.
bless her heart. That's what she'd say right about now. You know, with the same token, though, that it also happens when you're on vacation. Maybe they're not farming or anything. That's nothing they got to worry about. But they are on the road, and those brakes get hot.
Yes.
You know, and you may not smoke and flick a cigarette, but what if the guy next to you does, and it ends up in the back of your truck? You know, if they flick one in the back of my truck, you know, I've always got something in the back of mine.
Oh, we've
so I
had-
mean, it's
Yeah, we've had huge loads of hay, and somebody, you know, driving that, pulling that hay, throw a cigarette out, and it goes back into the hay.
hey, man, it is just.
And lose the, you know, people lose their groceries, they lose their hay,
Right.
they lose whatever they're towing, you know, when they throw a cigarette out sometimes, and it whips back into the cargo that they're hauling.
Right.
That's happened several times.
In all seriousness, though, I mean, I had told you earlier, I lost my house when I was 17 to fire, and that's something that I take very seriously. It's something that, hey, we appreciate you, we really do, because without you all, there would be a lot of situations that a lot less people would walk away from. And we really do. We appreciate you. And I know it was EMS week, you know, last week. We don't say thank you enough to our firefighters. I think we kind of take you for granted, and unless we have to have you.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate the efforts to prevent a fire. You know, that's the easiest fire to fight, is one that's prevented.
Right.
And so anything we can do to help prevent an accident or a tragedy for anybody, you know, we're that much better off.
Well, I tell
Everybody.
you, and I've been his ear this morning. You come in last second, and I really appreciate it, Mr. Francis.
Well, you're
we
more than
really
welcome.
do appreciate it. I guarantee you it's not going to be the last time I give you a call.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Of course, that's Brent Francis with our proud Princeton Fire Department right here locally. And, you know, if you see those guys out today, tell them thank you. And I know it may not be EMS week, but every week should be EMS week, because we sure do put a whole lot on them. I mean, that is at our worst moments in life, when you think about it, at the worst moments when you're at your weakest and things are really going wrong, that's when we need those guys. And fortunately, that's when they step in. So make sure that you tell them thank you, and tell them that you appreciate them. It is 8:51 on Coffee Talk. We're going to swap gears here in just a second, give you your full forecast one last time before we leave you this morning, WPKY.